Hybrid often gets sold as the best of both worlds.
The risk with hybrid is actually it's lose-lose.
How do you balance and how do you kind of build that culture of performance, set the expectation that we move fast here?
Really not that bums on seats culture.
You understand why there's like a fear or a feeling like if I'm in control, then bad things aren't going to happen, because bad things do happen.
The journey of hyper growth is not for everyone.
Hi, and welcome to What the FTE, the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk about what's really happening in HR, hiring, and the future of work. I'm Marcelissen, Head of People and Culture here at Certn, filling in for Andy McLeod today. I'm super excited for this conversation because today on What the FTE, I'm joined by Alice Burks, who leads people success at Deel, one of Glassdoor's best-rated workplace based on unsolicited feedback. She's here to share how Deel builds culture, clarity, and execution without the office. Welcome, Alice. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking about this.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. I know it's top of mind for me all the time, but what does remote first actually mean at Deel?
The most straightforward way of understanding it is that when people ask me, which they do all the time, where are your company's offices? I say, we don't have any. But they're like, but where is it based? I'm like, everywhere. So we have a globally distributed workforce of over 6,000 folks now. They're based in over 119 countries and counting at this point. And we work remotely. So people work from home, people work from co-working spaces. But for us, that means that we don't rely on physical, in-person office presence or ways of doing things to run our organization.
Awesome. So hybrid often gets sold, which is I think where a lot of companies are choosing to go instead of either fully remote or in an office. But hybrid often gets sold as the best of both worlds. I've seen you argue on LinkedIn that it can actually create hierarchy. Can you unpack that a little bit for us and see why that doesn't work for Deel?
Yeah, I mean, we have made choices for different reasons about why remote first is right for us. I can talk about that a little bit, maybe to set the scene. We were founded because of a belief that while opportunity is everywhere, that while talent is everywhere, opportunity isn't. And so we wanted to create a platform. We wanted to create the tech to connect global talent with opportunities wherever they were in the world. And so that often comes with opening up opportunities for a remote workforce, thinking about global hiring, removing barriers to making a first hire overseas, hiring outside of potentially a founding country. And so Deel began as an organization to support that type of remote and globally distributed work. And then our organization has built over the last 6 years to really practice what we preach and model that type of way of getting things done. So the piece around remote versus hybrid, obviously versus fully in the office, which if we took the whole spectrum of options that are available right now, you've kind of got the whole lot. I hear people speaking about hybrid as win-win. Sometimes it can be. I think in certain cases, for certain company cultures, there's benefit to having that level of kind of choose your own adventure, people coming into the office, people working from home. But I think the risk with hybrid is actually it's lose-lose. You'd end up pleasing no one rather than pleasing everyone. And I think within our space, people and culture, having and operating a hybrid business is the most complex way of thinking about your workflows, your communication strategies, your culture building activities, even things like your meetings culture, right? There's a whole different playbook because you've got some folks who are remote, some folks who are here together, some folks who are a bit of everything in between. I think one of the things that I have really experienced and been surprised by at Deel coming in from organizations that really were doing, RTO, 3 days back in the office, choose your days, but there was a hybrid component that we needed to work around as a people team. Coming into a fully remote organization, there is simplicity in everyone coming from the same starting point. You're designing your remote onboarding experience. Everyone is onboarding in a remote way. They might be in China or Jamaica or Brazil or the Netherlands. The country can definitely be very different, but the experience and the way that you're accessing and interacting with your teams, your talent, your leaders, there's a level playing ground, which within a hybrid world, I think is a little bit harder to standardize, because you have things like people feeling like they should come into the office when the leadership is there, or one leader's really pro-remote, another really wants to see people's bums on seats. And in a global organization, maybe there's a magnetic pull around HQ, because that's where more organic, over the table, over the coffee queue decisions get made, all of that. And I think you remove that in a remote first organization. Comes with a specific set of challenges as well. But I think in terms of a certain type of simplicity there, and a certain type of non-hierarchy across regions or across, office or not office, there's definitely a simplicity.
I think you touched on so many pain points that that people in culture or HR leaders like me see every single day. I think when you said, hybrid, we look to as the win-win, but sometimes ends up being the lose-lose. I think about any conference or workshop I facilitated where we've got a hybrid. I can do in person really well. Like if I'm doing a keynote or a workshop, something like that, and I can do remote really well. It is so hard to do both. And I think you've captured why that is not just in that circumstance, but in the workplace too, right? I've had so many times where I'm delivering something and I'm like, oh, I forgot about those people on the screen over there if I'm in person, right? Or vice versa, right? Like it's really hard to feel the tone of a room when you're not in it, if there's other people on site, things like that. You touch on so many things I kind of want to follow up on. But I think one of the pain points, like you said, for leaders is like you want to try and make everybody happy. I know I crave those moments when I do get together with people, whether it be for a board meeting or a specific function. I was able to bring my team together this year. We're a very remote team across the world, but we were able to get together in one location this year. Do you do any of that with Deel? Are there business cases for when you bring people together? Does that happen?
Yeah, great question. I would say yes. And we do also, as a business, maintain that we are remote first.
Right.
Let me start with what we do. We bring our leadership group together. So the 200 or so most senior leadership individuals within the organization get together once a year, early in the year, to kick off, strategic planning. It's like the leadership sales kickoff, equivalently, like let's reflect on the year just gone, let's plan for the year ahead, let's share also some of the incredible work that's happening cross-functionally around the business. That happens once a year. I would say that touch point has certainly inspired programming that my team has taken back into the business to go, look, at that global leadership offsite, I'm going to speak for myself, me, Alice, I learned so much about different activities that other functions were leading, more about our product roadmap. I had some real aha moments about our organization. And it really made me realize we've got to be more thoughtful about how we create these all the time, not just condensing them into one, beautiful week in Spain or wherever we've gone to. So we have taken learnings from the best parts of in-person dynamics like that, and then fed them into our remote first strategy. So thinking about how we reimagine all hands, for example, with those learnings in mind, or put on specific leadership programming that kind of draws from what worked in that in-person setting. I think going back to your original question, there are case-by-case instances of, again, functional offsites, again, typically at a leadership level, that's where the investment is made, because I would acknowledge one of the frictions of fully remote working is that some of the messy strategy, disagree with each other, throw some things on a whiteboard and see what sticks. You can do that virtually, but it will take you a lot longer. And often it's harder to distill, almost like juice the best stuff of that type of conversation. So I think that's definitely viewed as a worthwhile investment, again, for functional leadership groups coming together, unblocking, doing that type of messy work where maybe you do need to really disagree with each other sometimes, right? And then be able to, walk out of the meeting room and kind of shake it off and go and grab a coffee together. Yeah. I think that, again, it's a specific use case, but I think it is also an acknowledgement of some of the limitations or some of the things that are a little bit harder to deliver perfectly when you are fully remote.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is one of the things that every once in a while really sits with me after I've had to disagree with someone or say, no, this is the way that we're doing it. And then having to click that hang up button. Sometimes I find myself half an hour later, just pinging them to check in and go everything I've ever said about you before, where I'm really happy with your performance, all of those things is still true. It's okay that we disagreed. I wish we could go for that coffee kind of thing. Or let's talk about something else for a little bit just so we can reset the tone, because it can be a little bit tricky when you just kind of hang up after one of those. Gosh, I feel like we could do a whole nother session on what is in that playbook about what you learned and how it's translating to in person. But I'll hold off on that for now and kind of keep working through some of the things that I think our listeners are here for today. And you talk a little bit about this in there, but asynchronous work takes discipline. That's for sure. And I think there's a leadership instinct when something goes wrong, AKA you find out someone's got 4 jobs. That happens. I'm sure other people, that might be a bit dramatic, but I know in different places I've been in the last 5 years, we've certainly found out people have more than one, and that not be disclosed. But whatever it is, and I've found this throughout my career of often, sometimes leaders' instinct when something doesn't go right with one person is to make a rule and change everything. So how do you navigate being disciplined when you're asynchronous, not making an exception the thing that we assume is happening everywhere? And what does that discipline look like at Deel day to day?
Great question again. I think, again, the example, certainly one that has cropped up in my career and is maybe a little bit easier for people to deliver on when everyone is remote, although I've seen some in-person folks do the same. I think the biggest disciplines that I see within our async environment connect a lot to communication styles, and also connect a lot to the privileging of synchronous time. Because when we are asynchronous, and Deel, we have a phrase, you might have heard someone at Deel say this because it's often used, Slack is our office. So we use Slack for everything. It's our meeting room, it's our lunch table, it's our kind of team building space, it's our Taylor Swift fan club space. Whatever comes to mind is happening in Slack. I'd used Slack before I got to Deel, but I've never used Slack the way that we use it as an organization, because instead of relying on getting into a synchronous meeting, pulling people together to have a conversation live, because you have leaders, you have team members across 119 countries, so a lot of time zones, you are really reliant on very tight, crisp communication within Slack. That means adopting in some cases quite a specific and not necessarily like first language style of communication, because you have to lean into something that is as concise as possible, is as clear as possible, and is also highly connected to who is owning what do we expect the outcomes to be. You're really trying to make your communication as low ambiguity as it can be, because there's a high level of ambiguity when people are just reading your messages, right? And, reading, taking English, which might not be a first or even a second language. So having this muscle built of clarity, conciseness, and also that comfort with, and this took me a while to acclimatize to as well, this comfort with not having to have FaceTime like you and I are having FaceTime now to pick up pretty significant topics. You can use my leader. So I report to our head of people, de facto chief people officer. She's based in central US. I'm based in France most of the time. So my 9 a.m. is my 4 p.m. So if we are really working, set hours, we overlap in terms of synchronous time for let's say 3 hours if we're being generous to me.
Right.
And I can't save everything that I need to talk to her about for a face-to-face. Like, I have to take things to her in Slack. I have to use Slack as our mechanism for getting things done. And that is true across the business. I think that ability to lean into written and tight Slack communication versus saving things up for an in-person, synchronous touch point that just may never come or might come 3 weeks down the line because of diaries and crossover. That's definitely a specific muscle to build.
Right. I've got so many questions about Slack because I feel like I'm sure many that are listening to, Slack is essential for our business. It's a lifeline, but it's also a pain point. You talk about those channels, the Swifty channel, the coffee channel, all the channels. There are so many channels that sometimes you have no idea where you are. But you also talked about how important it is the way that we communicate in Slack. Is there something you do in the onboarding process? Is there a way you keep that? Because I think lots of organizations have these philosophies. And then if you go look at their Slack, that's not really what's happening. So yeah. I wonder if there is a way that you keep everyone aligned. If you keep, for lack of a better term, how do you police it? How do you make sure it doesn't, that discipline doesn't disintegrate over time?
Yeah. It's been an evolving journey.
Yeah.
So some really tactical things that we do in our onboarding for new hires. And also this applies, we have a very strong muscle of M&A, so mergers and acquisitions. And so the same rules apply for the onboarding of acquired businesses who, again, may never have used Slack, may come from a very different communication culture. So it's in both spaces, M&A onboarding and then sort of general new hire onboarding. We emphasize communication practices as a standalone facet of our new hire onboarding because we recognize that it is so unique and particular to Deel. We start that even in pre-onboarding materials. We talk about the fact that the organization is fast-paced. We talk about typical communication practices like conciseness on Slack, fast feedback in Slack, getting used to building work asynchronously in documents. So all of that, quite tangible stuff, the way in which you're going to likely interact with this async communication style, that is baked in through onboarding. We also have some very Deel specific Slack enablement. So we have 2 Slack courses within onboarding, and they're also available for people to self-reference separately. One is called Slack 101, which is the basics. You never used Slack before ever. How do you get set up? How are you doing your thing in there? How do you, and this happens all the time, right? We, not all the time, but this does happen where, we onboard so many new hires. I think last week we had 125, and most weeks it goes off without a hitch. Last week, one of them did accidentally archive our new hire. It happens. I know. It's like your first day. Don't worry about it. And I saw this little notification pop up in my Slack because I'm the channel owner. It was like, so-and-so has archived the channel, new joiners, whatever we call it. And I was like, you know what? I think it shows we're obviously doing a good job with Slack enablement, that this is the first time this has happened. So true. Yes. So we have the 101, which is the basics. And then we have Slack is our office, which is a lot more detail around how Deel uses it. So again, like the real specific stuff, like how do you name a project channel versus a temporary channel versus a channel for managers versus not. We talk about some of the hacks, like really going deep. Maybe I'm now an SME in Slack. Let's see.
I definitely am not. I feel like I'm just like most tech. I kind of describe myself as like adequate. Like,
yeah,
it's fine. Definitely not an SME.
So yeah, I think to answer your question, a lot of enablement. I think what we have that fast feedback culture. So when I see or when other folks see Slack being used, I would say it's less common to see Slack being used the wrong way, quote unquote. Right. What I have seen more frequently is that we don't use email for internal pops. So it's, I also am like, thank goodness, because Slack is enough. We don't use email for anything internal. If obviously, you and I used email to start up this podcast, but for internal, no. One of the bigger things I see that new joiners or people coming in through acquired orgs have to just adjust to is you will get sent an email and it's a beautifully composed, long update, including all of the stakeholders for something specific. And that's where I normally reply and say, really lovely that you've sent this. It needs to be in Slack.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
that's the archive.
Right.
As you send it to someone's inbox, like you might not get a response for a while. So more about that, like knowing that Slack is where we do things and not inadvertently going down the wrong communication channel.
That's such a great one, because I know even when I started the first time where Slack was the primary mode of communication, over time now it's like almost I forget to check my email because nothing happens in there, right? So it sometimes it isn't, within 20 minutes that I'll reply to an email, but I likely will to Slack. So it's interesting how that starts to build your normal just changes, right? It shifts a bit. I'd like to move on a little bit and pivot to so one of the things we touched on in the beginning, because I think these tie together really closely, but I'm going to see if you've got some insights for me. Where Glassdoor named Deel one of the best places to work based on unsolicited employee feedback. We all know, anyone listening to this podcast knows that's no small feat. Humans are more likely to complain about a pain point than send praise about something. So when you're getting that organic feedback and it's overwhelmingly positive, there's something good happening there. What do you think that your people are seeing and feeling that makes them say that and actually even encourages them to give the feedback?
There are a few component parts of life at Deel that make it special. One is the global community that we are all a part of. And it sounds a little cheesy, but I get to, my team manages new hire onboarding, and part of that process is getting people to share, where they're coming from, where are they based, what also attracted them to Deel's mission, like I described earlier, right? Talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. So how can we help close that gap? And just the stories that I've heard and that my team gets to hear in those sessions about people's journeys into this role, the excitement of coming into an organization that is built to do that work of helping, talent access opportunities that might not be otherwise available where they're based. I think people feel very strongly about that mission, and people tend to feel really part of this community of global team members, even though we don't see each other all the time. Maybe some people will never, see each other in an organization of our size now. One of our values is together everywhere. And so we do a lot of thoughtful work around that together everywhere value. So I can give you two kind of practical examples. One is we do really look for opportunities, whether it's in an all hands, like celebrating a team member story, or in like our end of year roll up. We did it together everywhere photo competition where we got people to send in pictures of wherever they were working in the world, no matter how kind of weird or wonderful. We really wanted to see it. And we platformed that at all hands. Those types of I would describe those as real small, quick wins within your internal comm strategy get so much love because they give visibility to the global crew that is Deel. They give visibility to one of the benefits of working at Deel, which is that we are remote. You can work from wherever you like within reason, provided it's still compliant. And I think the last thing, just connecting into that, is we've also been thoughtful and are continuing to be thoughtful about how our benefit strategy aligns with that together everywhere value. So we've introduced a Deel travel perk, which is per team member a travel stipend that enables anyone, myself, anyone in my team, to travel to meet and work with another Deel team member.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So going back to your first question about offsites, no, we don't open up that kind of budget availability for everyone, but we do open up this individual pot which people can put towards going and working together.
Right.
And again, we see great adoption there. My team are using it. We're going to meet in Rome in September. And again, I think there is I find, and I know my team, I know this, I hear from team members at Deel, there is something so joyful about learning from different cultures, learning about different team members' traditions and holidays and local cultural experiences that feels quite unique because of how truly global we are. I think separately to the global community, the journey of hyper growth is not for everyone, but if it is for you, Deel is the place for it.
Yeah.
So if you are excited by that pace, if you are into ambition and exceeding expectations, which is another one of our values, Deel speed is another, how do we get things done fast? How do we accelerate? I think the energy of being part of an organization that has the ambitions that we have and that is on the growth trajectory that we are on is really unique. It doesn't come along every moment of someone's career.
Right.
So I think people really recognize, they hear that from our founders and from our leadership about our ambitions, where we want to be, this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years. And I think that also creates a really special team member connection to the organization because it just feels rare to be part of a business that is experiencing the type of growth that Deel is now.
That really led into kind of one of my follow-up questions when you were talking about all the great things that you're doing for your employees, like all of the things that you're doing to build your culture. Yeah, I think it's really easy, especially in growth stage, to pass that off as vibes and as nice to have. But it's also enabling this growth. Like you talked about the M&A you're doing. You talked about bringing on 100 employees a week. You talked all of these things and everything you just shared. How do you balance and how do you kind of build that culture of performance, set the expectation that we move fast here, we're doing lots of big things. You're kind of in or out and that's okay, but we got all this great stuff. How do you do that without even burning your great people out. So I'm super ambitious. I'm willing to go the extra mile. I'm always going to jump on when I need to. How are you kind of working around burnout? It seems to be a thing that's happening all over the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm such a complicated topic, such an important topic. I would say one of the things that we do, and I think we do a good job of, is through interview, we work really hard on fit, on culture fit. We've introduced, our TA team have done some amazing work alongside our executive team at the start of this year to introduce a bar raiser program, like a culture fit, like a culture activation program called Elevate, which is a program, a final interview stage where there are specific culture champions within the organization who act as a final interviewer, and they are only there to ask value-related questions for Deel. So they're stress testing really explicitly. How will this person feel? How will this person perform? How does this person respond to our values, our ways of doing things? Whether it's deal speed, whether it's genuine care, whether it's exceeding expectations. And, that in partnership with broader hiring manager and interviewer training, where we are really explicit within our interviewers and within that community that Deel isn't for everyone. Working for a fully remote, hyper growth, 119 countries and counting business isn't for every candidate. Like that's okay.
Right.
And so to be transparent with candidates about what it is like working for our business, the good, some of which I've been describing so far, and also some of the challenges. There is pressure, there is high expectation, there is pace. I use the word adrenaline a lot because I always think, adrenaline junkies will have a great time. So I think some of the work to help teams manage burnout starts with getting people in the door that are going to be energized rather than overwhelmed by how Deel works. And I would say that transparently. Yeah. I think once you've got people in, we do work with team members, and we have kind of cultural guide ropes, which are really designed to help people feel like they can own their time. I think that's a really important thing for us. Again, being async, being fully remote, we are really not that bums on seats culture. We are, the proof is in the pudding. Proof is in your results, in your output. We are looking at what you are delivering and delivering against expectations of role. We're not looking at the green dot on your Slack being there either, 12 hours a day. But I think alongside that, there is a reality that within a global organization like ours, people are often going to be working slightly different hours to, I start at 9, I finish at 5, I log in, I log off, and that is my day.
Right.
I think, again, benefits being there's a high degree of flexibility and autonomy. In my team, people are picking their kids up from school, doing pediatrician appointments or doing their gym classes, all of that very transparent and, rock and roll, please do. Yeah. Because they're also picking up things outside of that traditional work day to keep, this is our go-to expression, to keep the ball moving down the field, to keep the ball moving down the pitch through an asynchronous team. It means that sometimes people are needing to just tap it along so that it keeps moving, and that tapping might come outside of hours. But I think it's about striking a balance between helping teams know that they have the autonomy to manage their time in a way that gets them to the point of delivering what they need to, whilst also making the most of the fact that you don't have to be going to an office and, commuting and being tied to a desk and having I mean, by the way, I'm painting the worst picture possible of the office. I know this is
Right.
hi. And having the whip cracked over you. No.
It definitely reminds me of my last fully in person pre-COVID. I won't time it too well, but that experience, that's exactly what it was like, is like, there's so many leaders and I still come across them every day. I was actually kind of going to ask you this question, but it feels like you've taken care of this in your interview process, is leaders who maybe still have that mentality of, if I don't see your green dot on and it's the middle of the day, how do I know you're working? Or I need you to come to the office because then otherwise I don't know if you're working. It's definitely not a mentality that I favor, but when I somehow am still shocked every time I see it, but still see it. I wonder if you've had any maybe best practice, I won't say issues, or have had this come up where you're embedding new leaders in a different way of working too, right? Especially more senior leaders that are very used to a different kind of style of work. My guess is maybe they're not opting in, but I don't know if you've seen that or if you've got any tools to help leaders kind of get over that thing in their brain that says, if I can't see what my people are doing, I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a kind of light side to that particular coin as well, which is, from a well-being perspective, in some regards, we do have to do a little bit of green dot management, because if a team member is hard to reach, if a team member goes AWOL, we haven't heard from them, our leader hasn't heard from them, the stakes are pretty high when you're fully remote, because actually, you haven't got line of sight on where they are, whether they were last online, etc. So I do think, even though I've made some light-hearted comments about not over-relying and not being overly observant of that factor, I do also acknowledge that there is a need. You don't need to know people are there and okay. That is definitely something that is still considered. I think what I would say where we have probably done the most proactive work for leaders in this space particularly, again, has been through M&A integration. So just doing a little bit of work to bridge where a leadership group might be coming from and what the new world is within Deel's environment. I think, again, it's always going to be a work in progress. Different leaders also have their own styles and ways of wanting to
Absolutely.
run their own ships.
Right.
I think overall, we're fortunate that, Alex, our CEO and one of our co-founders, and other exec leaders do also really set a standard here, in terms of flexibility and also transparency within Slack. So yeah, there's a kind of like waffly half answer.
Well, again, I feel like I could talk to you for hours because there's so many things you could dig into. I've thought about this in different contexts throughout my career where you just observe, you understand why there's like a fear or a feeling like if I'm in control, then bad things aren't going to happen, because bad things do happen, right? You do have people go AWOL. You have people, it takes a couple months to uncover that, oh gosh, they really weren't doing the thing I thought they were doing. That happens. So then that fear gets in you. But for me, again, it's about, enabling leaders to have some discernment, some discretion and judgment on where do I need to lean into someone? How to identify if something's maybe going wrong versus, okay, now I'm making a rule for everyone because of one potentially bad actor or problem area, something like that. So, but I think that's a thing. If we could, fix that, we would, have leadership fixed forever. So I don't know that we'll get to that today, but I love hearing about, one of the other things I picked up when you were talking is being unapologetic that you're not for everyone. I think whether it's sales, whether as a leader, when you're onboarding someone, being really clear about who you're for. Sounds like you're for ambition. You're for people who want to be a part of something big. You're for people who are excited about growth. And then you get the flexibility, you get those other sides too. But when you identify those right candidates, it must be helping you grow that culture so much. That takes courage, though, to say, I'm also not for you. Right. So that's okay. This is who we are. If you want in, we're excited to have you. And if you don't, we're excited for whatever you find that fits you better. Right. I think there's too much fear around that, but you've got that right.
It's been an ongoing message also to embed, not just for me, but our hiring community, because again, hyper growth comes with ambitious time to hire targets. And so again, if you've got someone who you think, the experience is good, but I've got some concerns about how they'll track into our world, I do think, and I really understand that it can be painful to have to say, almost like, I get told that I sell the nightmare in my interviews. I'm like, okay, if I sell the nightmare and their eyes light up, I know that that's perfect. It's
That's
like,
right.
they're it.
That's right.
I know that it can be painful for people when they found a great candidate, but there is that, like, not quite lining, not quite seeing or hearing enough to give us that confidence of success within Deel versus success in another type of organization. So I do think, whether it's courage or a little bit of like brute force determination, like we are getting there.
Right. Yeah. And I think, again, another subject we'll probably talk about for a really, really long time. But I think it's also the way you said, sell the nightmare. Something I say to my team all of the time is, be clear to be kind. So, like put it all out the table, and also know that there's more than one right way to do things. This is the way that Deel has chosen to do it. That doesn't make it good or bad or indifferent, that it's not the right fit and a different culture is the right fit for you. I think that's where we get to as people, where they're like, are we okay with that? Like, are we okay with not being for everyone? Yeah. Like, it's not for everyone as something kind of about their background or where they live, to Deel's position, where they live, where they work, like anything like that. But really to know that, this culture is one of performance. And, if that's not for you, that's okay. Like, there's other roles that might be a better fit. I love that.
Yeah. I also feel like a duty of care towards the candidates as well. I think that's part of the responsibility of an interviewer, is to, the culture, right, the ways of working. And so I think it's two way, isn't it? Like, there's duty of care on the interviewing side to know, I believe that this person can be successful here. And if I don't, then if there's doubt, there's no doubt.
There's no doubt. Oh, I like that. If there's doubt, there's no doubt. I love that. Again, we could talk forever, but I'm gonna try and wrap with one last question. What's something or a couple things Deel is doing culturally or operationally that you think every company should be doing? Now, we just talked about it's okay that there's lots of different companies, so I'll frame it a bit more as in high performance, positive culture should be doing, but very few are.
I think for me, the thing that stands out in terms of the cultural lens is that high autonomy culture. I think people are grown-ups. People tend to come to work wanting to do a good job. And my experience, and I think something that, again, remote culture supports, kind of because it has to, we have to trust you. And, we have to rely on that autonomy. But I think it lifts that autonomy to the top. And I think that, again, that is such a motivating force for people. I think when you can find ways of working, whether it's RTO, whether it's office attendance, whether it's, remote, whether it's work from anywhere, something we see is a level of, again, organizational commitment that I think is partly driven by that autonomy that comes from remote culture, and then is supported by the things that we've been talking about through this call as well. So I think, being able to find those opportunities to help people choose how to work for themselves in the best way for themselves, I think goes a long way with your teams. And then, I think every organization is different, but something that I and my team, really, really hold on to in our work at Deel is coming back to our values with everything that we're doing. So again, this is within people specifically, but it's really thinking, how do we really help those values, like live, breathe, drive action, never just be words that we like share in onboarding, but then actually people go into the business and like never see anything about ever again, or don't like feel they're really lived. And I think it's this is not an original statement by a long shot, but I think when you can really almost like aggressively anchor what your business stands for and how your business operates through your values and have that really tight connection, it's clear for your teams. It's clear from when you hire someone through when you onboard them, develop them, continue to engage them and hopefully retain them. It's like clear sets of expectations around what it's going to be like, what it is like to work for a business. And then you just want to keep stress testing that those values are working hard enough for you and that other aspects of your people strategy are working hard enough for your values, because I think that's two-way traffic always. It's like, okay, well, like how has our benefit strategy got anything to do with, our Together Everywhere value? Okay, let's talk about it. One example that, yeah, those would be my two hot takes, like high level of autonomy wherever you can find it, and then really aggressively connecting your values through your people strategy so it's clear.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Gosh, I feel like every time you've answered one of my questions, I feel a new episode coming on, because like the time values thing, I used to say like it should be more than just the sign in the bathroom. And now that we're not so in person, it's like, is it more than just your screensaver? And you like captured so much of that there. I want to just keep talking forever, but Alice, thank you so much. This was so insightful and so much fun. I actually can't wait to see the comments on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Like, tell me if you picked up a couple of the things that Alice said that you'd like to follow up on, and we can book another chat. But if you're listening and thinking about how to make remote work actually work for you and your organization, work for real people in real teams, we're building out a deeper dive based on this very conversation. You'll find it in the show notes below, or head to certn.co/podcast and sign up for the weekly insight drop, where you'll get the highlights from each of these conversations that we're having. It's free and it's made for senior leaders and people leaders just like you. Until next time, this has been What the FTE with your guest host, me, Melissa Marcelissen. Thanks so much, Alice.
Thank you so much for having me.